Hey guys, what's up? It's Biscuit Horror Reviews, here with a review of the newest film from Sam Salerno, who is the director of Dark Side of the Womb. That was his first feature film. I covered that one on my channel a few years ago. He was nice enough to send me a screener copy of that one. I also reviewed his second film from last year, Kiss My Ashes, which was a misfire for sure, especially after getting a very interesting, kind of absurd hit like Dark Side of the Womb. But there were some moments and some things I liked about that movie, but I really could not give it a positive review. Here we have his newest film. This is a short film. It runs about 26 minutes. Not out yet, but still. It's a found footage horror film by the name of Death by a Thousand Cuts. And before we get into this movie, because this movie was surprisingly kind of fucking depressing, we're going to be drinking tonight. So instead of having a beer tonight, I have Seagram's Jamaican Me Happy, because I felt like drinking something fruity instead of, suffering through a shitty beer. There we go. Alright. So, this movie has to do with a guy who runs a horror kind of video blog channel where he reviews movies and shows off gore props that I'm assuming the character makes. Essentially, one day he happens to see a woman being kidnapped, and he ends up going into the house she was, forced into, armed only with his camera. Now this does sound kind of like a dumb movie, or not necessarily a dumb movie, but the character sounds pretty dumb. But I think the actual setup for why the character is filming things is definitely very solid and interesting, and I don't think anybody has ever really done it with a found footage film, so I have to really give credit. Essentially, the movie opens with a news report talking about the aforementioned missing girl, Christina, and then we meet our cameraman, who is on his YouTube channel, and instead of talking about horror movies or showing off gore props, he wants to essentially film him going into this seemingly normal, house. Also, it's kind of explained through some of the dialogue within that scene that he experiences hallucinations, and that the reason he does is because when he was very young, a toolbox fell on his head and he passed out in the garage, and he was left there for a few hours before his parents found him. So, yeah. I also just like to assume things about characters, especially in short films when you don't get too much as far as character development. I do like to, I would like to believe that this character is probably into urban exploration, going into abandoned buildings and kind of searching around. Either way, he goes into this house, which the back door is unlocked, which is kind of weird considering the situation. Also, there are clocks and masks all over the walls, and it's got a very surreal, weird vibe to it, because it kind of looks like a normal house even on the inside, but there are clocks all over the walls and on the tables and countertops. It's strange. Ugh. Either way, the film is a pretty damn interesting one. Despite there being some problems, my problems being the kind of I guess the lack of character development. Again, it's a short film, and you can't expect too much from short films in that regard. So it's not like I was expecting it, but I feel like this movie could have fared a bit better, maybe as a feature. It's definitely, I think for what it is, it's pretty interesting and pretty good, and I do think it's pretty hard hitting and kind of depressing. But yeah, one of the biggest problems I have with this movie is that there are a few gore effects in particular. One being a hand being hit with a hammer, and the other being a severed hand being used as a doorknob. Both of those scenes felt really fake. And I get that this wasn't a professional studio film. They couldn't afford to make a robotic hand that would squirm around and move as somebody hit it with a hammer. So I get that it's low budget, and I can respect that. But that's kind of a problem. At least the film isn't technically like saying, "Hey, this is the lost footage." At least it admits straight up it is a replicated film. Oh, fuck, I lost my place in my notes. Um, the acting in the film is relatively decent all around. Everybody does a good job, I would say, with the material, and the material itself is interesting, and I think, if fleshed out a bit more, could make for a pretty cool feature. Um, Also, this film is shot mostly with, digital video cameras. In some of the scenes, it's cheaper digital video cameras, and in some scenes, they use what I'm pretty sure is a VHS camcorder. Maybe it's just a digital camcorder, and they made it look like it was shot on VHS. But either way, it gives the film quite an interesting aesthetic that really, really holds up throughout the entire runtime. It really has. God, fucking. Now I got the hiccups. Either way, the film visually is pretty interesting, and from a pure filmmaking standpoint, this is probably Sam's best movie yet. It's very well produced, despite the obvious low budget, and I was genuinely into it from beginning to end, and also it's a serious and straightforward film. It's not like Dark Side of the Womb or Kiss My Ashes, which are kind of weird, absurd, you know, ultra low budget comedy, dark comedies. This film is straightforward and serious, and that's kind of one of the reasons that this movie succeeds, especially after, you know, the last two films from Sam being absurdist, you know, comedies. The last two films being absurd, this one being fairly straightforward and, I guess, normal and serious in tone is kind of what makes this movie good. It shows that, you know, he's grown as a filmmaker from, you know, the days of Dark Side of the Womb. Again, I love Dark Side of the Womb. Really good movie. But that movie is cheap as hell. This feels, I mean, I'm not going to say it feels like a Hollywood production, but it definitely doesn't feel as cheap as I'm sure it probably was. Also, there's a really great prop in the film. I'm not going to spoil what it is, but it was made by James Bell, who is an independent director I follow, and he is a great, very interesting guy who directs kind of short art house gore films. Either way, I'm getting off track. At the end of the day, I, you know, like it. I think this is a pretty good movie. Yeah, I would have to say my biggest problem is that I wish there could be more to it. Either way, Death by a Thousand Cuts, I would probably have to give a very solid 3.5 out of 5, maybe 3.75 out of 5. Honestly, it's a movie that is just really. I mean, the word for it is interesting. Like, it's interesting. It's kind of poignant and depressing. I really like this, and yeah, I honestly am. I'm really excited for this to get released and people to see it, because I think people will actually appreciate this movie. Because I've seen the scathingly negative reviews for Dark Side of the Womb. Either way, that's it for this one. This is Biscuit Boo Horror Reviews, signing off. Peace.